So here we are with hot cross buns. I have the beautiful black limited edition Thermomix. There's only about 300 or so left of these in the country, so they're just about sold out, but they are pretty nice. All right, so first thing, you need a clean bowl. Mine wasn't. All right, a clean bowl, and we're good to go. So as I just mentioned, I have popped this onto Cookie Dough 3.0. So I've imported this recipe from the recipe community. So it is actually one on there called hot cross buns. We might in a minute pop the link into the chat box so you guys can actually go in and find it. So you can just import it. There's a little bit of editing on some of the steps to do to make it exactly how you want it. If you don't know what we're talking about, we'll chat later about that. That's all importing your recipes, or go and watch our YouTube. But once it's in here, it'll come up like this. You can see the picture on my screen, and you just hit start cooking, and it takes you right into the first step. So with this one, we need 270 grams of water. So same as guided cooking, your scales activate. You can't see my screen fantastically, but 270 grams of water. Beautiful. And then 5 teaspoons of yeast. This is a lot of yeast. And then we're going to warm this up. So 2 minutes, 37 degrees, and speed 2. Now, if you are a seasoned bread maker, you're somebody who regularly makes pizza dough and rolls and loaves of bread, naan bread, anything like that, you're probably confident with what 37 degrees feels like. So you could turn the warm tap on, put your hand under it and go, yeah, that's about body temperature. That's about 37 degrees. Pull your water straight out of the tap at that temp, and then tip that water in, add your yeast, and then skip this heating of the water step. Does that make sense? Yeah. So if you're a rookie, you've never made hot cross buns and you don't have a lot of experience using yeast, just follow the recipe and do this. Let it heat itself for 2 minutes. The reason being, if you heat yeast above 37 degrees, you will burn it and it will die. And if you don't heat it to 37 degrees, then it won't be warm enough to actually activate and do anything. And that's where you're going to get bread and bread rolls that just go hard and small, and they don't prove up and get nice, light and fluffy. All right. So that's the really big importance around this 37 degree mark. And that is why every Thermomix model has always had a 37 degree heating temperature. Seems really silly, but that's the reason. It's for your yeast, and there's a few other products that need about that body temperature as well. So this is nearly finished. I've got about 20 seconds to go, and then we are going to add everything else in. I have my stuff sort of pre-done, ready just to throw in. Now, once you get into this recipe, we add everything else in, and right near the end, when it's almost finished kneading, we throw in the sultanas. So if you go to make this recipe and you haven't made it before, weigh your sultanas out at the beginning so that you've got just the right amount. And then as it's finishing off the knead, I'll show you when to put it in, but you don't have to worry about going, oh, the machine's kneading and rocking, I need to weigh up 250 grams of sultanas. So do that step before. If you're writing notes, make a note of that. Weigh out your sultanas before you put everything else in. So I just want to show you, I wish you guys could smell the smell of this, just the water and the yeast. See how that's just gone all creamy and really thick? That's what that heating has done. If that was just cold water, that would just be grainy yeast in a bowl. But heating it to 37 is what makes it all thick. And you can really smell that starting to come through, because 5 teaspoons is a lot. So that's the importance of that temperature mark. Now, if I click in next, we've got all of these things going in. So, you guys can't see this great, which is a shame. When you have your own recipes on Cookie Dough 3.0, your screen setup looks a little bit different. And I love this. I'm a really quite experienced Thermomix user. So when it comes to guided cooking and I'm constantly pressing next, sometimes I think, oh man, it could just all be on one page. I wish those steps were together, those sort of things. On here, you can do exactly that. So I have add all the ingredients. They're all written down here. I have scales, and then in between, I can just keep tearing it back to zero, weighing in the next thing. I find it so much nicer than the guided cooking, especially for recipes like this that I'm a little bit familiar with anyway. So first things first, we put in 550 grams of baker's flour. So baker's flour is a little bit different to just your normal plain baking flour. It certainly isn't self-raising flour. It is a bit of a strong flour. Sometimes you'll call it a bread or a pizza flour. It is stronger. It's a bit higher in protein. It's also a little bit higher in gluten. So best and easiest way is just to go and buy yourself some baker's flour. You can get it from the supermarket. You can get it from any of your health food shops, and you can go and get it in bulk, which is what I do as well. And I buy it in a 10 or a 20 kilo bag. I have a big bag, and then I just have this container and I scoop out of this one. So we got 550 grams of this going in. There, 550. All right, now next thing is a teaspoon of salt. Now, if you haven't cooked with me, there's a few new people on here. I am not a measurer. I am very much a throw a bit in, see what happens at the end. Quick and easy is always the key for me, and never stopping to spend too much time measuring things in. So this is a teaspoon of salt. I just pop in about a teaspoon of salt. Next thing is 2 teaspoons of bread improver. So you can go and buy bread improver from the supermarket. It comes in a little box. If you are concerned or at all aware about what you put in your body, I really encourage you to go and read the back of the box of the bread improver. There are so many ingredients in that, it isn't funny. Most of them, I bet you won't be able to pronounce. You won't even know what they do. It is just packed full of preservatives and extras. This good old apple cider vinegar works pretty much identical for all of your breads and rolls and things like that. So if you're convenience as well of just keeping a bottle of this in your pantry that lasts forever, bread improver will go off over time, and it'll also go stale, and it is quite expensive. So lots of reasons why apple cider vinegar is nicer and better to use. About 2 teaspoons of this. If you are a measurer, please just measure. You don't need to do what I'm doing, but I'm just not a measurer. That's why I'm not. All right. Bread improver in. Now we have milk powder, cinnamon, and I'm using nutmeg, but you can use like a mixed spice as well, just depending on what flavors you like in your hot cross buns. 2 teaspoons of each. So 2 teaspoons of cinnamon, 2 of nutmeg or mixed spice, and 2 teaspoons of milk powder. It goes in. And then we have 65 grams of sugar. You control this recipe, so if you don't want as much sugar, just back it off. If you want a different stevia or something different, go for that. Use whatever you like. And then we have, you can scroll down on here. And we can. Beautiful. 45 grams of softened butter. Just a nice chunk of cooking butter. All right, now, click out of that. Now we go next. Now we need, now when you're in your created recipes, at this stage, there isn't all of the different functions added in. They are coming. There are more modes coming where you'll be able to just say need, click on it there and begin it. But at the moment, you've actually got to jump out. So click home, go across and click dough, if that makes sense. Again, if you need help with this, we can absolutely help with you one-on-one. But just in case you're already sort of there, 8 minutes and we're just going to start. So put my lid on. Now, before I start this, it's going to get a little bit noisy. You won't be able to hear me great. So we are going to jump over to Tash while this needs, because 8 minutes is a long time. As it's getting near the end, I'll pipe back up at about 1 minute to go. And I'm going to put my sultanas in and let them knead through for that last minute. But while this is going, I am going to jump over to Tash and she will talk you through the next steps from here.
Alrighty, so just while that dough is kneading, just a couple of things just to add into that. So Joe's going to add the sultanas in at about, so it's an 8-minute knead. Joe's going to add the sultanas in at about 7 minutes, so about a minute to go. You don't want to add them in any sooner because the blades will actually start to chop the sultanas. I did see in the chat box there was a couple of people asking about like different flavors and that sort of thing. So I don't know, Joe, if you're happy for me to just, quickly go over some of that now. Both Joe and I have tried lots of different flavors. Chocolate, white chocolate and raspberries, really nice. Apple and cinnamon. Obviously, you can just do fruitless, just leave the sultanas out. Basically, with the traditional recipe, the things that make the flavors are obviously the sultanas and the cinnamon and nutmeg or allspice, whatever you use. So if you are wanting to try something different, just leave those things out and add in whatever you want to try. If you want to do chopped chip, instead of the cinnamon, I would add in a couple of teaspoons of cocoa, cacao, whatever to give it that chocolatey flavour, and then add in chopped chips as well. Again, you don't want to add the chopped chips in probably even less than a minute because the friction of the dough turning, it actually gets quite warm and quite hot, and it will actually start to melt your chocolate, which you don't want that. The white chocolate and raspberries that I've done, I think I used about 100 grams of chocolate and about 100 of raspberries. Because the raspberries, they were fresh raspberries, it's quite a wet dough, so you do need a lot more flour when you're doing that one. And yeah, apple and cinnamon was the other one. So kept the cinnamon in, just took the nutmeg out, and then just put in chopped apple at the end instead of the sultanas. Again, you don't want to be adding it in, under a minute to go. The other alternative is that you can give your dough that full 8 minutes and then just hand knead your flavouring in at the end, so you're not risking it getting chopped up. So I have my dough from this afternoon that I made, but I've just quickly put it back in the oven to warm it back up, which just because I made this batch this afternoon and I didn't want it to be sitting, for hours and rising too much. So I stuck it in the fridge to stop the yeast working. So I just wanted to warm it back up again. So basically what we're going to be doing now is I'm going to be weighing these out into rolls, our little buns, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that and how to, get them ready for the oven. So this is only about half a batch. I've already made the other batch. I've got my little dough scraper here, which you can get from the mix shop. They're like $3.95, so they're super cost effective. And they're just really awesome to use on your silica mat. If you don't have one of these, get in touch with Joe or I or whoever your consultant is. And they're just, it makes it just really easy to cut into your dough. It's not going to cut your mat. So you're just going to take a little ball and then pop it up on top of your Thermi. That's about 84 grams. So you want them around 80 grams. And you want to get it, I'm a bit like Joe. I don't measure much when I'm cooking. I just chuck things in and that sort of thing. But with these, you do want to get them fairly spot on because obviously you want them to be even and you want the cook time to be fairly similar. So once we've got our little ball, it looks pretty rough at the moment, I'm going to pop it down on the mat. Just putting that in. My stand is not very good. So, all right, we're just going to squish it down so it's a bit like a flat pancake. Now, it's always handy to have lots of extra flour just in case your dough is a little bit sticky. You want to just make sure that you've got a nice workable dough. So I've got a little pancake there. You want to try and make sure that your sultanas and even your chopped chip when you're using chopped chips as well, that you don't have too many on the top because they will burn. So if you've got one side where there's lots and one side where there's not, just see there how I've just tried to make sure that there's not any on that side. And then once you've got your little pancake, I'm just going to take the edges and just pull it in and turn him upside down. That's going to be the top of our bun. And in my hand, I'm just kind of working it around whilst shaping the bun. Does that make sense? So at the bottom, it's going to look a little bit like a purse, I suppose, that there's all these little bits, but your top's going to look nice and rounded, nice and shaped. You want to just try and make sure that there's not too many sultanas on top there, because like I mentioned, they will burn. So, and my tray's going to be nice and hot. I'm just going to pop him on my tray and we'll do the next one. When you put it on your tray, you want to make sure that they're just touching. So not, crowding each other, but just kind of sitting nice and close. So this is the beauty of having your Thermomix with your scales. Just tear it off. That one's only 75, so just add a little bit more. 82, that'll do. So again, I'm just going to, my dough's a little bit wet because it's been cold, so I'm adding a little bit extra flour. But if you're using your dough from scratch, I suppose, you shouldn't need to do that. So I'm just flattening it out again, turning it over, and then just pulling those edges in. Sultana there. And then I'm going to flip it over so that's our top. And I'm just pulling that in and around. Can everyone see that okay? Does that make sense? So I'm just kind of pulling these bits in as I'm shaping it on top. So that's our bun. So like this one here is probably going to be okay because it's a bit protected by a bit of dough there. But yeah, if you had a sultana sitting on top, you'd probably get burnt. So when I pop them on the tray, you kind of just want them to be just touching. Sorry, Jo, do you want to jump in there?
I will. I've got 20 seconds to go. I've got a minute left. Just before I do, have a look at my Thermomix and how much it's moving. If you didn't get told this when your machine first got delivered, never leave the room while it's kneading. It's got a lot of weight in there that it's tossing up and down, and it's going to move a lot. That could potentially walk this way and go off the bench. So just keep an eye when it's kneading. So I've got a minute left, and I'm just going to start tipping these sultanas in. So you can hear those pauses. I sort of do my sultanas in bits and bobs so it really gets all around and through the dough. It's got about 25 seconds left now. We'll just finish kneading them all in. When the Thermomix is using that knead function, it's essentially tossing the dough up and back down, up and back down. And that is why it tends to walk a little bit around on your bench, whereas any of the other chopping and stirring and cooking and things like that won't move. So it's not something you need to ever be worried about. Thermomixes, you always should be able to walk away and leave. That's the whole idea of hands-free cooking. It is only when it is actively kneading. Most of your recipes, doughs and things are like 2 or 3 minutes knead time. Hot cross buns are a really long time, 8 minutes. So that's the only thing to keep in mind when you make it. Just don't leave the kitchen for 8 minutes because it would be disastrous to have your Thermomix fall off the bench. I'm just going to move this over here. Now, I'm using this dough mat. You might have seen Tasha's got the same one. She unrolled hers. So I'm literally just doing the step before where Tash started off. So you can see I've got my dough in here. My sultanas are all around and a little bit mixed through. I'm going to tip this upside down. This dough tends to be a little bit sticky. Some doughs will completely come out. In saying that, that's my bowl. It isn't terribly sticky, but it is a little bit stuck in and around the blades. Some loaves of bread and pizza dough and things like that come out a little better. So you just pull any little sultanas out. You can see I've just got a tiny bit left on that. I'm going to pop it on for a dough pre-clean and all of that will come off. Now you can see, bring it in nice and close. You can see now my dough, Tasha's a little lovely and kneaded through because she'd done this before she wrapped it up. So mine just needs to have a little knead through just by hand. You can imagine if you didn't put the sultanas in that last minute, then you'd have quite a bit of kneading to do to get the sultanas mixed in. So This is only a tiny bit you have to just do by hand. When you're kneading dough, the Italians say that you dance with your dough. You never push it, you never be rough with it, but you're just picking it up and you're dancing with it. Sounds really, really silly, but honestly, the next time that you're kneading, try and do that. Rather than being, rough and trying to push it in, try and dance with it. Try and just be gentle and just keep folding it in on itself. And you'll find that the dough works so much nicer for you and it really comes together so easily without much effort. You really don't need to be rough. And kneading shouldn't be hard. I know that because we don't do much of it now because we have our Thermomixes to do, kneading really does feel like such a big chore and so much work and you get a sore arm. But when you just have to do a little bit like this, it's actually really, really enjoyable. So you can see that's all I need to do. All those sultanas are worked in. This is my beautiful blob of hot cross bun dough. So despite whatever flavors that you've used, this is your dough. This needs to go and rest now for about 15 minutes. Now, this is the super gold tricks. If you have a thermomat like this, roll it up. This dough is just needed for 8 minutes, so it's warm. It's really quite warm. So wrapping it in this, even though it's a bit of a cold night now and we're coming into winter, this dough will stay warm in here. That yeast will stay at that optimal temperature and this will just rise up. You can't sort of see whether it doubles in size in here, but you'll see that it starts to burst out the seams. Usually about 15 minutes is a good time for this in here. But like Tash mentioned, and what I'm going to do right now, it's 8:30. I don't want to do a full batch of hot cross buns now, so I'm going to pop this in the fridge and do this in the morning. If you are wanting to have fresh hot cross buns at Easter time, this can be a really, really good idea because they are best to eat that day. You could actually do the dough the night before. In the morning, all you need to do is everything that Tash has done tonight. So shaping them, popping the crosses on, sticking them in the oven. So just takes that step out of it, makes it a little bit quicker. All right, that's enough from me. I'm going to put a liter of water in my bowl now. I'm going to pop it on for a dough pre-clean. The dough pre-clean doesn't heat the water, so it doesn't cook the dough on, doesn't cook that flour and water mix. It really just gives it a great wash. It takes a few minutes, so I'll show you it at the end, just after that quick pre-clean. So if you haven't seen it or if you don't have a TM6, you can get a really good idea of just how effective it is. But that is all from me. I'm going to throw back over to Tash and she's going to keep on going with that next step.
Alrighties, hopefully you guys are keeping up because I know it feels like we're probably jumping around a little bit, but there is, the 8-minute knead time and then the 15-minute rest time and stuff. So we obviously just didn't want you guys sitting there twiddling your thumbs, waiting for all that time. So once your dough has rested for 15 minutes, which is where Joe's dough, say that 10 times, is up to now, is when we're going to shape them. So, yeah, it's a little bit, all over the place, but I've just finished shaping these ones. So there's 9 there. And then these are the ones, which was, not quite half the batch that I've done this afternoon. So this batch does about 15 at that 80 grams. Once you've got them shaped like this, we're going to make the piping mixture, pop that on, and we're going to let them rise. I think it's for an hour, the recipe says. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. And we're going to give them that second proof again before we pop them in the oven. Now, again, I've already made my...
just quickly, an hour proof time or until they've doubled in size. So that's really important because we have people here from Queensland and Victoria. Your temperatures in your houses are going to be really, really different this week and next week. So really important, if you're sitting in a 20-degree house, your dough is going to rise at a really different rate to a 30-degree house. So keep that in mind. An hour, roughly, but keep an eye on them. If they're doubled in size, if you let these rise up too much, they will rise and sort of sink. And you'll watch that happen. If you cook them early, they won't be as light and fluffy. So this is where there is a little bit of skill and a little bit of learning and getting to know bread and dough and how it rises and how it cooks. But generally, you'll see these go from the size that Tasha's are now to sort of, double in size. And you'll see our cooked ones at the end. That's the sort of size that you're looking at before they go into the oven.
Yeah, so I was just going to show, they're the ones that they're on their second proof. These are the ones that I cooked this afternoon. So can you see there just kind of roughly the different sizing? So yeah, like Joe said, probably more the key point is doubled in size, not so much the time. So all this mixture is, and it's all in the recipe, it's just flour, water, equal parts, 3 tablespoons of each, a little bit of, I think it's a teaspoon of sugar, mix it in your Thermi for 30 seconds, speed 4, scrape down, do it again. These handy little bags, again, you can get from the mix shop. I think they come in like packets of 100 or 50. They're just disposable icing piping bags. If you don't have these, you can also just use a snap lock sandwich bag and just cut the corner of it. So I just pop the bag in over a cup like that, and then just scrape your mixture straight into it, and then just snip, a little tiny bit in the corner. So I'm going to pipe these on. You can pipe however you want. There's no rule to say that you need to have crosses, but for these ones I'm going to be sticking to the traditional crosses. My kids often like to just pipe their own shapes and hearts and whatever else they want to onto them. Whenever I've made flavoured hot cross buns, I've just kept the same mixture and the same, just piped them the same as the traditional ones. But again, you don't have to. Like Joe said, you know, like it's the beauty of cooking in your Thermomix. You can make it as unique to you as you like. There's a little bit left there. If you wanted to do like a double batch, I certainly wouldn't be doing the dough as a double batch because that's already quite a big dough recipe. But certainly for this and the glaze at the end, you could be easily doing a double batch, no worries. Alrighties. Pop that over there. So there's my piped buns. I'm going to pop them over here so they can now double, and then I'll pop them in the oven. So we're going to pretend that we've let them double in size. We put them in the oven. I don't even know. Don't even ask me how long cook time. When they're brown, they're ready.
20, 25 minutes.
There we go, 20 to 25 minutes. Again, it's obviously going to depend on your oven and all the rest of it. But yeah, these ones were cooked this afternoon. You can see I obviously wasn't concentrating too well because there's a couple of sultanas on the top here, and you can see they're actually not too bad. But yeah, I have had, these ones here you can see are a little bit more burnt. So that's why we want to try and get that underneath. So what I'm going to quickly do now is I'm going to make the syrup to go on top, which by jumping into my recipe, it's literally just water and sugar, and it's just a sugary syrup that that goes on top. I have been quite impatient sometimes, or I should say the kids have been impatient, and they've just eaten them without this on top, and they still taste just as good. They just don't have that nice like syrupy flavour. So it's just 2 tablespoons of water and 2 of sugar, and then we're going to melt it for 3 minutes. So I'm just going to pop that in, and 2 of sugar. Now I often find that amount is more than enough. Helps if I put a lid on. Hey, there we go. Is more than enough for 2 batches. So again, if you want to do a couple of batches, the cross mixture and this mixture you can double, or even with this one I wouldn't quite double it because often this is enough for 2 batches. So that's just going to cook for 3 minutes. I'll pop that to the side. get my pastry brush, if I can find it. Does anyone have any questions? Just checking the chat box.
I have.
Did we cover off? Sorry.
No, all good. I was just going to say, I popped a few links into that chat box. So if you haven't had a look, jump in there and have a quick look now. I have our YouTube channel in there. So if you want to go back and watch any of our old classes, or, you know, direct anybody to this one once it goes up. We also have a community group. So our whole team of consultants, there's about 16 of us. We have a community group on Facebook called the Life Changers Community Group. We're called the Life Changers. That's our team. We believe that we are changing lives by putting Thermomixes in kitchens, teaching people how to cook. So we have a community group on Facebook. You can join in on that. We post tips and things like that, any events and things that we have coming up. But we also have an inspiration challenge starting soon. So if you're just looking for a little bit of inspiration on things to cook, it might be midweek dinners, it might be snacks for school, whatever it might be. We're all going to be running a bit of a challenge, posting lots of new recipes on there, just trying to give you some inspiration. We'll have prizes and things like that. So if you're not a part of that group, I know there's lots of groups on Facebook. Jump over and join that one. The link is there in the chat. I've popped below Natasha's Facebook page. So she has a business page there on Facebook. You can go and like her page and follow along with her stuff. And I have mine there along the bottom as well. So there was a few names in here, so I thought I'd just put those links in so you can follow along with us. I also just wanted to mention, we currently have a few spots open in our team. So if you are watching along and thinking, this looks pretty fun and I wouldn't mind working at nighttime while my kids are in bed instead of going off to work during the day, we can have you join virtually if you are not local. So that means that you run your business where you are. I look after you from here, and we Zoom and do things like this for all of your training and support and things like that. Or if you're local, we do a little bit of stuff in person too. So we do a little bit of both. But that option is there. So if you're ever interested, or even if you just have questions or want to know what it's about, what's involved, anything like that, please come and have a chat with Tash and myself, and we can talk you through what it looks like and whether it might be an option for you as well. Especially if you've already got a Thermomix, it can be a pretty cool side hustle. Tash began with a TM6, and I actually signed up to get one. And we've both earned black Thermomixes this year, so a nice little extra on top of our normal wage. So it is a pretty cool job, and we get to do this, cook with people. So if you want to know any more, please come and chat with us. We'd love to let you know. All right, back to Tash.
Awesome. Thanks, Jo. So yeah, that was 3 minutes, 100 degrees, speed 3. If you can quite see without me tipping that out. That's our syrup. So I'm just going to get my pastry brush, and you can see, hopefully, I'll just bring it in a bit closer. When you put that glaze on top, it really just sets it off. You can see the difference between this one that's all nice and shiny and the other ones that are a little bit dull looking. So yeah, that's it. It's super easy. Hot cross buns are a little bit time consuming because you've got all that proof time and the oven time and whatever, but the actual steps are pretty simple. The Thermomix does the majority of the work for you. And yeah, I think there's nothing better than homemade hot cross buns that look, I reckon, better than shop bought ones, and they certainly taste better. So these are my 6 I made this afternoon, and by putting them, you'll see the bottoms, they end up coming out reasonably good looking. And by putting them nice and close on the tray, and then when they do that proof, they'll turn out like this. So it's like a 6-pack that you've bought. So I'll just crack that open. Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to grab a knife and cut one, if I can find a knife. Give me a sec. Keeping in mind these ones are cold, They're not, you know, fresh out of the oven because I did cook them this afternoon, but you can see, hopefully you can see the texture. It's quite a nice fluffy dough. Yeah, I reckon it's certainly a pretty cool thing to be able to make from home. You can see that one's got a bit more texture and sponginess, fluffiness to it.
And what I love is that after making the dough, this is my bowl with a dough pre-clean and soap, just a drop of dishwashing liquid. You can see that's just full of bubbles. I'm going to tip this into my sink and use it as part of my washing up water now. And my bowl will be completely clean. So anytime that you make something fiddly like this conventionally, something like this with a few stages, you would have so much washing up. You'd have, you know, a floured work surface, and you'd have a big dirty bowl from kneading and dirty hands, and then you'd have another bowl where you've mixed the cross mixture together, another one where you'd have so much washing up at the end. Whereas with this, you just rinse or do a pre-clean in between each step. And at the end, you've got a tray full of hot cross buns and a bowl that's washed itself up. So it really is one of those things that just sort of blows your mind. You can do all of that in here with no mess. It is really, really cool. Does anybody have any questions? Anything that you want to know or pick our brains about? And while you're thinking of those or popping them into the chat, I would like all of you to pop a number 1 in the chat box if you are going to go and try hot cross buns after watching this tonight, or a number 2 if you're still not too sure, you think they're still a little bit too scary. Number 1 or a number 2? Woohoo, fantastic. Got 1 so far. Who else? Different flavors. Yes, absolutely. Woohoo, all 1. We must have done a good job. Awesome. I'm just going to turn our recording off.